Welcome again to Crime, Corrections, and Culture, the show where we give you the straight dirt about crime, criminals, corrections, and we're not going to give you any hyperbole. We are currently discussing Inside the Criminal Mind, the great book by the late, great Dr. Stanton Samenow. And with that, I'll turn it over to my co-host, Persephone.
So, before we discuss the next chapter, Megan left a question on yesterday's episode. So, yesterday we were discussing how the criminal thinks of himself as a good person at the core of it. So, Megan's question was: were there any criminals who thought that they were fundamentally scum? Someone very close to me, not a criminal, has always felt a fundamental sense of unworthiness, but I get the impression that this is very rare.
Uh, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, the problem is there's a lot of mixed values and mixed sort of things going on. There's subconscious stuff. So like criminals don't really have good self-esteem. So in that sense, they don't think they're worthy and they don't think they're capable. Much of what they say and do is a pretense. It's a mirage, a facade rather that they put up, and often it's for themselves. If that makes sense, it makes sense to me. You know what I mean? But I don't know if it makes sense to others.
Yeah, so in you previously you've said that you thought that you were a good person, but you also said that you had, you know, I can't remember what your exact words were, but you know, bouts of like feeling really shitty.
Right, and I
So I
also
guess
didn't.
it
I also didn't think I was worthy. You know what I mean? I thought I was unlovable. I thought I was unworthy. I wasn't confident in things that I did. That I could succeed in life.
so Samina actually in the chapter that we're discussing today, which is about mental illness.
Is it called
Mental
getting
illness
over
or
on the shrinks?
it's called mental illness or criminal personality. He actually says something that sounded like verbatim what you said the other day. It's specifically when he's talking about the criminals who commit quote unquote senseless crimes. Um, and he talks about how difficult it is to understand, or for like rational people to understand what they see as a senseless crime. It makes sense to the criminal. So the specific thing that he's talking about in this example is two guys who were bored, so they chased a guy down in a car and shot him in the back. And everyone was trying to sort of assign some kind of meaning to this, like it was racially motivated, or it was this, or it was that. But at the end of the day, they were just bored. And the other example, the main example that he talks about in the beginning of the chapter is a guy named Clay, who I feel bad for the guy, but he outright says like, I'm bored, I want to go commit a crime, I want to go do something illegal,
Yeah.
um, which is insane. But anyway, so yeah, he said it's you can't really make sense of these things because it's not rational, and it's very hard to make sense of it, honestly. So anyway,
Yeah. He also, Dr. Samenow, wrote a book. I don't know. Let me let you go because I don't want to preempt what you may be getting ready to ask. So
no, no, say what you
no,
want to
I don't
say.
want. I don't want to. I don't want. It might take us. I want you to drive the conversation.
Okay, so this whole chapter is the first part of it is about mental illness, right? He starts off this chapter talking about a guy named Clay who has this long list of disorders that he is diagnosed with over the course of his life: schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever, whatever. And this guy has problems with his parents. He has bouts of rage. He fantasizes about killing people. He fantasizes about molesting children. So he's just like a screwed up guy. And he gets so many diagnoses over his life, and he's in and out of treatment, and eventually he starts working with Samenow, and the thing that helps him is to identify what he's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just to give sort of like a broad overview of that beginning part of the chapter. This was a really weird chapter for me to read,
Okay.
because there is sort of some thinking that mental illness contributes to criminal behavior, right? They committed crimes because they were mentally ill. But then as he starts talking about the insanity defense, he explains that even if you have a mental illness, you're still in control of your behavior. He's still Clay, which is the guy that he's talking about that had all of these diagnoses, was still in control of his behavior. He made choices.
Yep.
I don't like this.
I thought you were I thought you were gonna ask a question, but if you're not, I'll just go. I thought you were leading into a question. That's why I didn't say anything.
My questions are gonna come later.
Okay, I want to tell you about Mike Oulette.
Okay.
Persephone, look up this guy, Michael Oulette, Bristol, Connecticut murder. You know how to spell Oulette? You may not. It's
No.
It's Oulettete.
O-U-L-E?
Yes,
T-T-E.
T-T-E. Yes.
I'm so good. I spelled that right. The first time.
Awesome. Bristol, Connecticut murder. Okay, so I first heard of this guy. I was watching the news, and he murdered a priest. Right? Did you find him?
Charged with the murder of Reverend Robert J. I can't pronounce the surname. Lees?
It doesn't matter.
At
but go
St.
ahead.
Matthew Church in Bristol in June 1999. He was a 32-year-old homeless drifter. Attacked the father with a heavy candlestick holder in the church after being denied permission to sleep there and told to go to homeless shelter.
Okay. So this guy was schizophrenic. I knew him well. I was in the block with him for many, many years. And upon first meeting him, everybody in the block, including me, is like, this guy should not be in jail. This guy should be in a mental health facility. Clearly, he's not right. And I stick by that. I don't doubt the mental illness, mental problems, whatever you want to call it. So, however, after years of getting to know him, I would see things in his behavior. For instance, subtle manipulations, inconsiderate stuff. For instance, he needed a CPAP machine because he snored. And you're in a cell with someone who snores like a bear. It's very uncomfortable. But he would not wear it because that would make him uncomfortable. So it was screw the cellie. So, and he always saw himself as a victim. In short, I could see the criminal thinking patterns in him apart from the schizophrenia.
Yeah.
So he thought criminally regardless, and this was not his first offense either. So he would make the excuse that he was hallucinating and he thought the Catholic Church was after him. But here was the thing. He had been on medication. He chose to stop taking it.
But also, he didn't walk into a church and attack the father for no reason. He beat him to death.
I didn't know that until right now. This is the first time I've ever known that. When you said that, I said that adds a layer to this.
So this is the thing, right? So Samenow says you can have cancer and chickenpox at the same time, but it doesn't mean that one caused the other. Yes,
Right.
it is very possible to have like a mental illness, but having a mental illness, even a serious one like bipolar or BPD, um, that isn't an indicator that you are going to become a criminal. So, for
Yes.
instance, I have borderline personality disorder. One of the main characteristics of borderline personality disorder is extreme rage. So, I had that when I was young, and I've worked through it. Despite the fact that I had instances of extreme, like destructive rage, I never beat anyone. I never attacked anyone. I never killed
Right.
anyone. And so yes, sure, you can have a mental illness and maybe it makes things a little bit more difficult for you. But in all of the cases that Samenow looks at where the person has a mental illness, there are patterns that show that that person was in control of their decisions. They made specific decisions despite the mental illness. And he said he was involved in two pleas for insanity that he thought were valid, and the one was overturned by the jury, and the other one was a woman who was hearing voices, and he those were the only two in his very long career of insanity pleas that he thought actually had a valid case to plead insanity. Because for everybody else, like a guy that murdered his friend and then claimed that the voices told him to do it, right? It later came out that him and this friend had had a very contentious relationship and they had been having a lot of heated disagreements, heated arguments.
Right.
Then there's sorry, one more example. He talks about a guy who robbed a bank, and the reason that he gave for robbing the bank is that his father was the insect god, and his father, the insect god, had told him to do it. But if you look further into what had happened, he had been living on his own. He had worked a job. He'd gone and gambled away all his money. He'd gone to a state where it was legal to gamble. He'd managed to get the bus there. When he decided to commit a robbery, he used the winnings from his gambling to go and buy a gun. So he didn't rob a deli or a convenience store, he robbed a bank. So he made a series of decisions that showed, even if this was true, that he did think that he was the son of an insect god, he made a bunch of calculated decisions. It wasn't just like walking up to a random person and trying to mug them with a salami.
Yeah, like so this guy Mike Oulette, when he first got in this, he moved in the cell with a buddy of mine in prison, and the guy said, at first, oh man, I feel so bad for this guy. He doesn't belong in prison. About a month later, when he had been fed up with living with this guy and the type of cellmate he was, he came out. He says, yeah, he knows what the fuck he did. Like he knows. And there was another guy in prison, for instance, who just was nuts. I don't know how else to put it. He was obviously not right upstairs, but the criminal patterns were separate from the mental health patterns. The criminal behavior and patterns were very similar to mine. Now, everybody that I've come across, to a man, people that I thought to myself, wow, this person doesn't really belong in prison, or I thought, oh, this was an out of character crime or whatever. After being able to talk with them and look at them, you can see the patterns. They're there. And it's like, wow.
Yeah. So Reclusi says, I think we can separate claims. We should obviously not say mental illness causes crime. However, some illnesses, I think, can causally contribute to criminal behavior in some circumstances. Point is, I think there's not a blanket statement to be made, but you can't fully dismiss the role that mental illness can play.
Well, he
Sure.
said that there were two people that he came across that were genuinely, the mental illness led to their behavior. If somebody has a legitimate psychotic break, I would buy it, right? If there's a legit, I don't. It's very difficult to prove, but hypothetically, a legitimate psychotic break where somebody turns to violence, I could buy it. But here's the thing: we're talking about you can't just take away the context in how many people Freud, for instance, thought that that criminals were mentally ill, right? That's not the case. The point is that prisons are not filled with people who are mentally ill. And even the mentally ill normally exhibit the criminal thinking errors.
Yeah, that's why Michael said that even if they were innocent of committing that crime, they were still criminals. So, my slight issue with, that mental illness can causally contribute to criminal behavior. How do I want to say this?
I don't know, but let me ask you, Persephone, do you think that it's not possible that somebody could have a break from reality that leads them to behave in a violent way?
I do.
Right, I do too. Right, so I think that is a distinct possibility. I don't think it's all that common.
I I don't think it's all that common either. So I think that my issue with that statement about mental illness contributing is that mental illness, if we're not talking about things like a psychotic break where you're completely divorced from reality, or like very extreme untreated schizophrenia, we're talking about mental illness, and you say that it can contribute to crime. I feel a little bit like you are absolving that person of the responsibility of their own thoughts. You're almost saying, well, it's fine, you can't help it, but there is enough evidence that people can help it.
Yes.
It might be really difficult. It might be extremely challenging and painful, but the, mental illness doesn't rob you of all your agency, doesn't rob you of your ability to make decisions. It might be making decisions more difficult. It might mean that making the good choice is more difficult, but it does not absolve you of the responsibility of your own choices.
Well, okay, let me give an example. Do you know what Capgras syndrome is?
Yes. Am I thinking of the same thing?
Capgras syndrome essentially is where people believe that their loved ones have been replaced by duplicates. Yes. So I knew a guy that claimed to have this, whether he did or not, I don't know. So he killed his wife. And the claim was he thought she was, and I don't think McNaughton is the standard anymore. And
there's
not
a
another
few.
Guitar channel.
That is one of them.
Yeah, but I don't think in the United States generally that I think it was. I might be wrong, but I think it was replaced by Durham, and then even different. But it doesn't matter. I don't want to get into that right now. So I want to talk about this guy with Capgras. So he kills his wife. Okay. And he says it's because she's been replaced with an imposter, right? Okay. Why kill her? Right? Why not leave? Why not call the police? You understand what I'm saying? Like, why go to the place where you murder her? It's like the guy who murders the neighbors and says, well, I thought they were aliens. Okay, did you contact the police about this? Did you contact anybody else? Did you try to maybe get away from them? Whatever the case may be, the volition. Because so Jim says up here, makes a very good point right here. Is his volition the ability to think intact? If so, then choice is an essential part of the true cause. There is also an additional problem with the insanity defense that I don't think Samenow addresses. Thomas Saz, the great psychiatrist, was once asked to testify in a murder trial of a woman who killed maybe her children. I don't know. She killed somebody. And the woman's claim was that she was insane at the time of the offense. So Saz testified in court without even interviewing the woman. And the defense attorney says, how can you assess her if you didn't interview her? And Saz says, well, here's the problem. Even if I were to find that she's insane right now, that would
You
tell
don't.
me nothing about what was going on then. Right? And if she is sane now, I really don't know what was going on then. How could I know? So that's another problem with the the idea of the insanity defense. But by and large, and again, we could find that the exception where you had a psychotic person, an extreme untreated schizophrenic, that committed a murder. But this is not who we're generally talking about when we're talking about people in prisons. Prisons are not full with people, I can tell you, who have had psychotic breaks.
Yeah. Um. So he does talk quite a bit about the insanity defense and how with most of the people who have tried to plead insanity, that there's very clear evidence that they made a whole bunch of quite rational decisions to get to the point where they committed their crime. The other thing that he talks about in this chapter is sort of when people say that a crime came out of the blue, that a lot of the time it didn't come out of the blue, that there was a lot of maybe not visible signs, but at least signs to that person, to the person who committed the crime, that they were going to do this. So,
This is where I was going earlier, Persephone. You see how you got there anyways, and I'm very happy I didn't just jump in with what I wanted to say.
because you would have skipped like the most important part of the chapter.
Yes. So Dr. Samenow also wrote a book called The Myth of the Out of Character Crime.
Yeah.
And it's true for a couple of reasons. One, because a person is literally, their character is made up of their values and principles, and values are expressed ultimately in action. So if a person does something, that's literally a part of their character. That's one. Two, when I first read the book, if you ever read As a Man Thinketh, and I'm not saying it's a scientific book or everything in there is true, but I find it to be a very helpful book for self-improvement, and much of it is true. And he talks about how action doesn't just come out of nowhere. The thought was long there before the person acted out of it. And again, and this goes to the people I've met in prison. I've met people in prison who seemed like they were like they were just normal people, regular people. And you think, wow, this person, that really must have been out of character for them to do whatever they did. Upon conversations with them, however, and I haven't talked to every person ever. I'm just saying that my experience does confirm what he's saying. That when you delved in and you talked to these people, as kids they were wild, as kids they were doing things they shouldn't have been. There were other crimes they were committing that probably nobody else knew about. They did have underlying anger issues. You could still see the criminal patterns manifesting themselves in prison. So by and large, his hypothesis to me, his statement to me has been confirmed over and over again. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. You, Persephone, are not going out tonight and all of a sudden saying, I think I'm going to commit a robbery. That's not happening. You're not going to go out tonight and say, oh, this person pissed me off. Let me commit this murder here. Those thoughts are long built up, and then finally they find an outlet and the person acts on them.
Yeah. But also always in all of the things that he's talking about, you're reading the examples, you're reading manifestations of these thinking errors that he talks about, right? And things that don't make sense to a normal person. So he talks about this woman who was caught shoplifting quite a lot of merchandise. And her mom was apparently shocked. It was like, I can't believe this. But then it comes out that this girl has been shoplifting for years, and this is her job, basically. She speaks to people and they tell her what they want, and she goes and steals it for them and then sells it to them at a discounted price. And this has been going on for ages. So the mother was shocked, but I mean, it wasn't surprising to any of the other people who knew this girl that she was eventually caught shoplifting. Um, was it like that for you? Was there ever anything that you did that people were like, "Wow, I didn't
No.
expect that"?
No.
I didn't think so. Have you have you been diagnosed with any?
Yeah, plenty. Oh,
Do you
I
want to
was
talk about them?
sure socially, emotionally maladjusted when I was, I think, 5 or 6. Conduct disorder when I was in high school. PTSD. Dysthymia. Depression, and ultimately, generalized anxiety disorder.
What's dysthymia?
Depression.
That's an odd word. So, did these diagnoses ever mean anything to you? Were you like, oh, this
Um,
explains things, or did
oh no, 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 no.
so
The only real diagnosis I think that actually, well, conduct disorder just means that I kept getting in trouble.
yeah.
As socially emotionally maladjusted is just a precursor to conduct disorder, which means I just keep getting in trouble. The PTSD was largely diagnosed based on lies that I told the psychiatrist because I wanted the good drugs. And the generalized anxiety disorder actually is real, and panic disorder for sure. Those are real. And with I don't know if it would be OCD or just a lot of obsessions, but yeah, that's real. There's no escaping that. But that has nothing to do with my criminal behavior at all.
Yeah, so right at the beginning of this book, he talks about one of the criminals that he was speaking to that said, if I didn't have excuses for my crime before, after years of like psychology, I have more than enough excuses.
Okay.
I was just
Just I know. I'm
re-
just
just
waiting.
re-
No, I know.
just reiterating that. I mean, how many people that you were with in prison had like actual mental problems that you could see or
Well,
that
it
you spoke
depends
to
what
them
you mean
about?
by mental problems. I mean, I've known people that were whacked out badly, but I
What does
like I.
whacked out mean?
I mean, you can tell they're not right. Like they're some of them they can't hold a decent conversation, paranoid. I had a cellie who believed that the correctional officers were having barbecue. They locked us down so they could go smoke pot in the yard, and that they were shoveling dust into the ventilation system, and that prosecutors were colluding with, like I mean, I've known some nutty people.
I'm just trying to think other than schizophrenia or a psychotic break, any mental illness that I would accept as a good excuse for crime. And I can't think of one other than
Me neither. Unless there's a psychotic break, if the person still has volitional control, then yeah, if the person has volitional control, they're responsible.
yeah, it's such a tricky subject because I know mental illness can be.
It's funny you say that because to me it's not.
Yeah, I know, but you're a very specific type of person. But I know that mental illness is a sore subject for a lot of people and a sensitive subject for a lot of people. And there there is a desire in some people to excuse a lot of things based on mental illness.
Sure. But we're here to tell the truth and give people the straight dope with no bullshit.
Yes. So the thing that I kept coming back to in this chapter is that I've also been very sympathetic to people who are mentally ill. But then if I think about the people who I've known who are mentally ill, they're not criminals, right? They're not using mental illness to justify criminal behavior. They are maybe sometimes kind of shitty, but they're not criminals the way that Samenow talks about criminals. Um, I don't really have super a lot of questions about this chapter.
That's fine. We're a half hour in. That's good.
Yeah,
We've done an episode.
I don't have a soft out today. I
What?
can, you know, the
You've
last time
got
I said I had,
you mean you've got a soft out. You don't have to go. That's what
I
you
was
mean.
I was making a joke
Yeah, but it
because the
wasn't
last
funny.
time
See, that's the thing. If you're gonna tell jokes, you have to be funny. I mean, otherwise, it's just.
read the comments. We'll reach a point where
Akira wants
psychotic.
Akira. Oh, hold on. This is better. Akira wants to know if you're weirded out. Akira thinks that reading about the criminal mind is weirding you out.
Honestly, no, it's not weirding me out. It's very informative. It's very interesting. Um, but no, I'm not weirded out. I'm not easily disturbed. Also, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but my father was a criminal,
You
so
have,
I
yes.
recognize a lot of this behavior in my father, which is interesting to me. Um, and it makes me understand a little bit of the behavior that I saw in my father, which I didn't understand because it never made sense to me. How a person could behave the way that he behaved, um, who was otherwise, you know, I was about to say otherwise a decent person, and then I caught myself. A person who I loved, right? Who behaved in ways that were really kind of inexplicable to me. Now I'm reading this, and given what I know about him, um, it's just kind of it's informative, and it's interesting to me how we again. I did not exactly like I was a straight laced person. I wasn't a person who like didn't get in trouble or drink or do drugs. I did a lot of awful stuff when I was younger, but I never thought like this. So we in the drugs episode, I did drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I did hard drugs. I never thought about drugs the way that Michael thought about drugs or how Samenow describes people talking about drugs. And the people who I hung out with who did drugs didn't think about drugs in this way. So that's fascinating to me. So, no, I'm not weirded out. I think it's very interesting. I think it's very important to talk about.
And we will keep talking about it. And when we finish this book, there's a lot more I've read that we're going to be going through.
Yeah, we have a very long list of books to work. I'm glad that we chose this one, though, because this is interesting. I read a really terrible review of this book,
I've read
by the way.
several. Yeah, I've read several.
I read it the other day. I can't remember. I stumbled across it in the ethics subreddit, and they said they can't believe that anybody would read such a steaming pile of shit. And I was like, I wanted to ask them, how many criminals do you know?
Probably not many.
That's what I think. I think that they read this book and they don't actually know any criminals, and they were like, well, it can't be true.
All right. We are going to be back here Monday,
Oh, right, yeah.
right? For those of you tuning in on X, by the way, the channel that this is on is the Rational Alternative on YouTube. Is it also the Rational Alternative on Twitch?
It is not. It is currently the Capitalist Corner on Twitch, which I don't actually know if I can change.
Okay, either way, if you're on X, you can go to YouTube. It's the Rational Alternative. We have this show. We have the Capitalist Corner. We also do Everyday Ethics. This show is on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time, where we give you the truth about crime, criminals, and corrections. Right?
And we're on Spotify.
And we're on Spotify too. Do not forget it, folks. All right. Thank everybody so much for participating. Really appreciate it. For those of you who are going to be watching us on the Capitalist Corner tomorrow or Everyday Ethics tomorrow, we'll see you then. For everybody else, we'll see you Monday. Take care.
Bye.